Hey guys, I told you we might be doing some other things other than OBS stuff. Like I said, I've been working on this Grand Marquee here. I have just received all the parts finally to fix it, so I'm going to go ahead and show you what we got here and try to outline what is required to do so. So let's check this out. This car has a coolant crossover pipe and it goes underneath the intake, runs from the back of the water pump here through the bottom of the intake and goes out to one of these heater hoses over here. That blue on this car, it's got 180,000 miles on it. Not really surprised. I have a whole bunch of parts over here. I managed to find a OEM intake manifold because the car currently has a dormant on it. I'm going to pull it out and show you a little bit of a comparison with that. The coolant crossover pipe is this metal tube here, and the part number for that is there. So when you do the coolant crossover pipe, you need 2 of these O-rings. And then since the intake's out, we're going to go ahead and do the thermostat since that's in the intake there. One other thing I had to buy was gaskets. The part number for these is it's a Fel Pro. It comes with all the upper intake gaskets and your throttle body and also coolant. So another thing you want to buy are these Fel Pros. These are for the fuel injectors. Since you're going to be taking the fuel rails out, you'll need a couple of these. I bought 4 packs, so got that. And the car has an oil leak from the oil cooler. This car doesn't have an actual oil cooler, but it still has those passages that run into the block. So this is the gasket for that. I'm gonna go ahead and try to outline some of this stuff for you guys. Like I said, I know a lot of OBS guys have these. Try to add a little bit of extra content. There's a million videos on YouTube on how to do the intakes on these, but I'm going to try to highlight this a little bit better for you. So we'll go ahead and get into this. All right, guys, so here's the tools you're going to need to do the intake on this car. So I have a whole rack of metric mid-length sockets. I have my swivel impacts here. These are also metric. A 7mm, 10 millimeter, and a 10 millimeter, deep, short, and then a small extension. I have a 3/8 to quarter adapter, a 13 and 15 deep well, 13 ratchet wrench, 15 ratchet wrench, 3/4 ratchet wrench, a 3/4 standard, this crescent wrench here. We have the 4.6 liter special spark plug socket with a short wobble extension, 6-inch extension, 3-inch extension, the 3/8 ratchet, obviously the pry tool, the quarter drive inch-pounds torque wrench, the 3/8 ratchet, 3/8 impact. Your pliers are here, a pick, a knife, then the radiator tool, along with the high temp anti-seize. And I used a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench for the other stuff. That was a little bit more than 18 foot-pounds. All right, guys. Obviously, the airbox is already out of this. I have the inner fender out because I have the computer out of this car. But, obviously you want to unplug your mass airflow sensor. There's a nut over here for the 2003 car, which I'm working on here. Loosen this hose clamp up, and you have a PCV valve here. So this will come right off of here. But the only thing you have left is you got to pull this guy out and just give this nice, easy persuasion, and that whole intake assembly comes off there. So I got the air intake tube off over there. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have to go around and unplug all these electrical connections. So there's a bunch on here, including the alternator. You want to make sure that you have your battery disconnected, and we're going to go ahead and go around and unplug all of these electrical connectors. So if you watched my tool video, I said about pry tool. I will use this on all these connectors because these connectors are 20 years old now. They're dry. Sometimes you can't get them to release real well. So we're going to go ahead and go through and remove all of these connectors. Now we have all these electrical connectors taken off. We have a breather here and what looks to be a coolant line here and another breather here. So be very, very careful with these hoses, as you know, with age they do become dry rotted. Another thing I want to point out is you have your throttle body and cruise control cables here. So you need to make sure you unclip these from all the brackets. There's two, there's one here and one there. Make sure you unclip those off. And we'll take this bracket off back here behind the EGR. And that way we can get to the EGR tube. We got this bracket off back here. I'll show it to you here. It sits in there like this. There's an EGR tube. It's right here. It's a little hard to see. I had to use my old trusty crescent wrench here for that. But I soaked it a couple days ago with some PB Blaster, and once I broke it free, it came out very, very simple. That was a plus. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you got a vacuum line here, you have a vacuum line on the fuel pressure regulator, and a vacuum line on the end of the rail here. So like I said, we're following this for a 2003 car. Newer could be different, older is different also. We are taking off a Dorman plastic intake for this car. We're going to be replacing it with a Ford, so I'll be comparing those two also. I'm going to go ahead and get this alternator off of here along with this bracket, and then pull this throttle body assembly off and just swing it across so I don't have to disassemble the throttle lines. The next order of business here is we got to have all these vacuum lines off. You want to be very, very gentle with these. These are the hard plastic. They do like to break very easily. So we're going to go ahead and take this throttle body off. Now there should have been 5 8mm bolts there, but there was only 4. Somebody lost one at some point. So this should be able to be picked up, swung over here. Now you just have these 2 lines you got to deal with. Keeps your throttle body out of the way without having to disconnect any of your cables here, which can pose problems. The next step here is we're going to take the fuel supply off, take this fuel line off. There's a bracket back here. We're going to try and take it off without removing the wiper panel here. We'll see if we can get that off. If not, then I'll have to pull this sole wiper assembly off, and then we'll pull this coolant hose off over here. I was able to get this stud out of the back there. It would be right here without taking the wiper cowl off. So like I said, this is a 2003 car. This is the stud you're going to get. So this is from a 2006 and up car. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. This is a 2006 and up. This is a 2003. So that extra length on that stud isn't needed. Nothing clips onto this stud. This is a notable change you could possibly make. It would make it a lot easier to get in there and get that bolt out. That's a 15mm. Used a deep socket to break it free, and then used a ratchet wrench to get it the rest of the way out. Whereas you could use a mid-length socket on the newer style. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to take these fuel rails off. So this is the long stud, so keep that in mind. And then once you have that back one out, the top bolt out, this bracket comes right out. This is why I don't like the Dorman. So they give you these self-threading screws, and we all know how plastic is over time. And these are the only things that hold your fuel rails down. So as you can see, these are nice and loose. So we'll use the pry tool and pop them babies out. One thing I want to note is you want to be very careful with this. So you can damage these fuel injectors. Like I said, I have new O-rings for these, so that's one thing. So I'm going to clean these up. I'm going to actually grab a shop vac and clean up around those holes. You might be wondering, why didn't I clean that up before? Well, there's too much stuff in the way to really get a good clean around it. Once the injectors are out, you take your time and be careful. You can clean up around there. If you have air, you can blow that off of there, but I had already had the intake open. I didn't want to have any dust flying inside. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take off these coil packs. So I do have new coil packs for this car. It's something that I just wanted to do for preventative maintenance. A lot of guys have told me that it's unnecessary. So I went and bought 8 Motorcraft coil packs and 8 brand new platinum plugs for this car. I still haven't taken these hoses off yet, but I wanted to get this sensor out before we get too far here. So this is a 3/4. Ratchet wrench makes this a lot nicer. So I got the coil packs out, and I want to show you something here. So the coil packs can stay pretty good. However, this boot is not good. I had micro misfires with this, and as you can see, it's pretty bad. So the coil itself may be fine. However, they call it a boot. Technically, it's a spark plug wire, so to speak, but it's a boot that goes from the coil pack directly to the spark plug. And all those coils came out super easy. Every one of those boots is shot. I'm going to throw away all the boots and keep the coils as spares, but I think that was probably the problem with this car as far as the micro misfires. If you have the ability to have one of these hose removers, these are nice. Come in here, just get underneath that hose a little bit, just work it around. It frees that hose up real nice, and then you can just pull it right off of there. That way you're not trying to damage your hose. You can just set this off to the side. The hose in the back here that goes onto the intake, it's already off. I have it propped up right here. This clamp can be a real bear. You want to make sure when you put this back on that it is in the right orientation. So if you ever have to take it back off, you have that ability. That's just something to keep in mind. As I was looking at this intake here, you got a couple bolts. You have to take the tooth for the thermostat out. Those hold it down. And then there's 4 on each side, plus this one. We're going to go ahead and get those bolts taken out of there. And that should be the last step here. The only thing I can suggest now is going around, since the coil packs are out, and cleaning up around those holes as best you can with a sweeper or a shop vac. Okay, so this intake's all free. Should come right off of here. You just gotta take your time and work it out of there. So now you can see this tube. You can see it down here leaking. Very off in the corner here. It is leaking right here. It has an issue where it wore on the inside. This tube comes up and around and comes back here. So I may end up having to take this wiper cowl panel off to get to that bolt that holds that on. We're going to find out. If you're just doing an intake replacement, you would come in here. You want to plug all these holes to make sure they stay nice and clean. You can go in and then blow out the spark plug holes. And obviously these are the Dorman gaskets that we won't be reusing. So make sure you get them off of there. And clean that intake up really good. Use some brake clean. If you want to, you can Scotch-Brite it a little bit, but make sure you have something in there to protect those holes. That's something to think about there. And like I said, I'm going to go ahead and cover replacing this coolant tube, because that's the whole reason I've taken this intake off, is so I can replace that. I didn't want to do a redneck fix where they try to put something in there and come out around with a hose. It's not the right way to do it. See if I can get that off of there without pulling the cowl panel. Okay, so I was able to get back in there with a combination of the battery ratchet here with a 10mm swivel socket. If you watch my tool video, it's the X-Drive swivel sockets. And then after that was off, that pulls the ground wire off that is on the stud, which is here. And then after that, you can use regular 3/8 ratchet with a mid-length 13mm. and you can get that stud out of there fairly easy. So the next step is to try to get this tube off. As you can tell, we're draining the coolant in this car. Luckily, there's a pan underneath it. I'm going to try and get this out of here and disconnect it off of this hose that's over here. So once we do that, we can go ahead and start reassembly. We finally got the coolant tube out of there, and it was, just as I thought, kind of a pain. However, your full disassembly is complete at this point. What you can go ahead and do is clean up your gasket material areas there, clean out your spark plug holes really well. If you wanted to do spark plugs, now is the time to do it because it's a heck of a lot easier. We will cover the reinstallation in another video. Thank you for watching.